Sam. Uh, so-
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning into Deborah Kobylt Live. And I've got a real treat on the phone with us today, Barra Grant. Barra, thank you so much for being here. You are the creator.
oh,
You're the creator, actor, producer, everything of Miss America's Ugly Daughter, currently playing at the Greenway Court Theater on Fairfax in Los Angeles. What a terrific play. Why don't you take it away and tell us what is Miss America's Ugly Daughter about?
what it's about is when you're a child, if you're told that you're chubby, that you have buck teeth, if you're judged by your mother, you retain that information throughout your life. I think that's why a lot of women who are somewhat, I'm not saying I'm beautiful, but women who develop into graceful, lovely looking women carry with them a sense of being ugly because they weren't supported when they were kids and allowed to think that they were beautiful.
Now, may I tell
And
the.
it's
May,
also,
go ahead.
I think also internally, you develop a philosophy about yourself if your parent has been less than flattering to you.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, these truths are ingrained into you when you're little. So that's why the title of the show is what it is, Miss
However,
America's Ugly Daughter.
let's talk about Miss America. Your mom was Bess Myerson, the first Jewish Miss America, may I say, from New York or Connecticut? Was she from New York?
Yeah, she was from the Bronx,
Yeah.
and she
So,
was the first
I,
ever Miss America.
also growing up at a time when Miss America was everything, like there she is. And I couldn't imagine when you walk in the room, it's like, there she is, Miss America's daughter. And wow. I mean, what a burden in a way, right?
Yeah, I guess it was. And she was also kind of famous as I was growing up. She was the star of several daytime quiz shows, which were very popular. And there was always a crowd of fans waiting for her at the stage door. And she had to sign a lot of autographs. And it was a larger than life growing up experience.
What was your
She was
dad
really,
what was your dad like,
sorry.
Bara?
Well, unfortunately, my dad stood in the shadow of my mother, and he was in World War II, and he never quite recovered from that experience. And back then, men weren't allowed to have post traumatic stress disorder, so they just thought he was weak. And in the end, he became an alcoholic, and he died quite young because he was an alcoholic. So that's the story of my dad. He just couldn't hold his own up against my mother's fame. So
Now,
it was a sad story.
your mother
Yeah.
reluctantly got into beauty pageants. She never really wanted to do that in the first place, and here she is winning Miss America, and then the rest of her life, just unfolds once you're Miss America, especially back in those days, right? She was involved in politics. She was involved, as you said, in television shows. I mean, she knew presidents. I mean, where was there time for you?
There wasn't.
Hmm.
There wasn't any time. Um, you kind of followed her along if she had to travel and brought you with her. But she was extremely busy. I didn't see her very much. But her presence permeated my being
Hmm.
because I was defined as her daughter as opposed to Barra Grant. I was
You
Bess Myerson's daughter
you
all through my growing up.
you called your mom
Yeah.
a narcissist. What do you mean by that? You think she tried to be a good mom, or she was like you were just an accoutrement off to the side? What do you think?
I think she tried. I really do. But narcissism carries with it a self-absorption and a
Mm-hmm.
self-involvement, and you really pursue what's important to you as opposed to what might be important to your child. Um, and the world kind of revolves around you. And if it isn't, you do everything you can to make it do that. So it doesn't work well as a motherhood definition. Mothers shouldn't be narcissistic. They should lavish their love on their children. So we have something to feel good about.
You know, I know
And
you have a daughter, and I'm a mom of three
yeah,
sons, and very often, they will criticize me from here to Chicago, and I think, God, I'm doing my best. Don't you think that as moms we do our best, and she was probably thinking she was doing her best, not realizing she was hurting you? Did you say to her, even as you got older, like, Mom, I need you. I don't need Miss America. Did you have those talks with her?
not really, because as a doctor, I was very involved in psychology at school and in my own life, and I kind of understood her.
Interesting.
So I didn't ask for things that weren't possible. So I bit the bullet. I fell in love uh, with a couple of few men, and finally with my husband. And it's sad to say, but men can also help boost your ego, as well as if you were lucky enough to have a good mother. But I think you put your hopes and dreams into a man,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of typical for women who uh, need a little more love and affection than other women might need.
It's so interesting. There's
So I,
no manual for being a good mom, right? But the way you talk about it, you have a great relationship with your daughter. Sometimes you wonder, was that supposed to be your journey where you didn't have a role model that you felt like you could look up to? So you dug in, you studied psychology, you had a really terrific husband and a daughter that you're close to. Don't you feel like in a way you went through all this so that you could be here, right?
well, you either use your mother as a role model, or you don't.
Right.
And if you don't, you go very far in the opposite direction and lavish love on
Hmm.
your child. And that's what I did. And we have an extremely close relationship. And I think it's largely because I didn't want to follow in my mother's footsteps. And I kind of knew what would work for my daughter and how to love her and how much time I needed to bestow on her so she would feel wanted and happy.
Plus, you had
So
a go ahead.
I turned the tables. I went I went at it from the opposite point of view. As opposed to her being loveless, she was loved.
Such an amazing way to
So
heal, though, to turn it around, as you said, and turn the tables. Because your mom also had many men in her life. And look what you did. You ended up having one big love in your life, which was amazing.
yeah, well, in that way, I improved upon
Yeah.
what I grew up with because my mom was very unlucky in love, and she chose men who she thought might be the answer, and none of them were. And that created a sadness in her. But it also created an independence where she kind of forged ahead in despite the odds, and she had an ingrained courage because when she won, not only was she the first and only ever Jewish Miss America, but she won in a year of great anti-Semitism in the country because it
Oh,
was the end of World War II, and a lot of people blamed the Jews for the war. And so when she went out on her tour, she was not popular and nobody wanted her.
oh,
So she
wow.
never got to finish. Yeah, she had to go home because all her scheduled events were canceled. And she had to go home midway. And the Anti-Defamation League finally called her and said, look, you're still Miss America. Why don't you go out to schools and talk about hatred and
Hmm.
influence the minds of children that might not yet be tainted? So she wrote a speech called You Can't Be Beautiful and Hate. And she went into the schools and she gave the speech. And that was the beginning of her politic uh, kind of career because she learned how to be a spokeswoman. And after that, she went on to give many, many speeches for Israel Bonds, Anti-Defamation League, United Jewish Appeal. She was very involved with Israel. Uh, and she became a champion. So when I stand back, I'm in awe of her. I
Right.
think she was quite phenomenal. It's the personal life, which is what my show is about. Because there are people who come to the show and say, but Bess Myerson was a queen. She was extraordinary. And I say, of course she was. This show is about my life
Remember, remember
and
I
what it
told
was
you?
like.
Remember I told you as I was leaving, because you come out and you mingle with the audience, by the way, everybody, if you want to get to know Barra as well, or at least just say hello to her, you do that. And a woman came up to you immediately and said, why didn't you talk about, and you said to her, because this is my story about my mom. It's not about my mom. It's about my story with my mom. I thought that was a great way to answer it, and it's true. This is your story, growing up as the daughter of someone that America loved very much, eventually loved her very much, and the effects that it had on a child who just wanted her mom to sit with her and, I don't know, do Play-Doh or something, right? Did mom ever do that with you? Just sit around and do Play-Doh or color?
No,
Yeah,
no. She made sure that I had piano lessons because she was a concert pianist.
right.
That's how she won the pageant. And it's interesting because the year she won was only the second year of talent. And most
Oh,
of the girls twirled batons or yodeled or had a little dog trick they did. And my mother sat down at the piano and played Grieg, and she played Gershwin on the flute. And that's really why she won, because I guess she was very beautiful, but she also had the talent to back up the beauty.
you know,
And
I,
that's really,
I can really
I mean, the
relate.
judges,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I can relate to
The
this.
judges,
Go ahead. I'll let you
you
finish.
can.
Sometimes it's hard by the phone. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was just going to say that the judges were warned not to vote for her,
Oh,
that the people from the pageant did not want her to win. But because she was so extraordinarily above the other contestants, the judges knew they would be vilified in the press and by the general public who was in the convention center. So they voted for her, even though they literally have been warned not to vote for her.
a couple of things what I love
So,
about in the play also, you have a screen behind you where you're talking to your mother. And also, there's a voice from beyond where you talk to your mother. Oh, I love that. She'll call you a lot in the middle of the night. And you'll say, Mom, stop. I'm trying to sleep. I actually found that very, very endearing. I thought that was actually very sweet. She was irritating to you, but she was reaching out to you in her own way as she got older. But I love the way that you play that in the play. It's actually it's a great visual to watch that as well.
yes. And it also comes from the truth because my mother didn't like being alone, even though she had to be when she wasn't involved with a guy. And she would call me. And it was up to me to be awake and continue to talk to her until she was ready to hang up.
I found
But
that to
she
be
didn't like,
one of the most endearing parts of the entire evening is when she would call you. It just and the way you would handle it. You were very funny. You're a terrific actor, may I say. You're terrific in this play. You're playing yourself and looking back at yourself as a little girl. The way you do it, the way you wrote it, Barra, is actually brilliant. I hats off to you for doing that. I really admire you for taking this on. I have to say. Go ahead.
yes, well, it's interesting to write about your own life
Yeah.
And if your own life wasn't 100% happy, you can find a way to express your pain through comedy and making people laugh at things that they recognize in themselves. And my goal in the piece was to create a comedic story that eventually became somewhat tragic.
Yeah.
If you can make them laugh and make them cry, you've done your job.
Well, you've done your job well.
So
You know, I relate to this
thank
also
you.
because I was going to say I have a much older sister. It's just the two of us, but we're almost of different generations. She's quite a bit older than I, and she was in all the Miss New Jersey pageants, and I used to get carted around going to them. Oh my gosh, I couldn't stand it. I don't have that, kind of personality to be a pageant person. And I remember they would look at me as I was little, and I didn't look like her either. I too was sometimes chubby, sometimes not. I was more of an athlete. And they'd say, "So, are you going to get into pageants too?" And I'd say, "No." I was so irritated by the whole experience. It's something about this pageant world, where it surrounds, it's surrounded in perfection, where you're supposed to be perfect, look perfect, play the perfect piano or baton or whatever. It's very unsettling for those of us who aren't like that, but especially for you, being the
Oh,
daughter of a Miss America.
I know it's a lot to live up to, and my favorite moment. I've been a screenwriter for a long time, and finally they made one of my films, and the head of the studio was born and bred in California, and he didn't know my mother, and my mother came out for the opening night, and he said, "Oh, you must be Barra's mother," as opposed to everyone else who would always say, "Oh, you must be Bess's daughter." And it was terrific to finally be called by my proper self and be recognized for my own work and my own efforts.
Well,
But I think,
go ahead.
go ahead.
That for sure. I mean, I can't imagine how cathartic this must be for you too. Well written, well produced, just beautifully done. So funny. Miss America's Ugly Daughter. It's terrific. Now it plays here in Los Angeles until March 24th, right?
Right. And then we're reopening at a theater here called the Edgemar the first week of June.
Oh, great.
We're reopening it, and that's in Santa Monica. And then hopefully by November we'll be in New York.
Well,
That's
look,
the game plan.
they all know her and love her in New York City. That to me seems like a given. And I'm sure that that's going to happen because, wow, that's terrific. So I congratulate you. It's a terrific play. I loved seeing it. I've been telling all my friends and family to go see it as well. So I wish you a successful run. And I'll see you next time because we're probably going to go out and see it again.
Thank you. You're terrific.
Yeah, thank you
It's
for your
been great
honesty.
talking to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for your honesty in
Thank
this
you.
play too, because there's many people who feel less than from their parents, even if their parents didn't realize what they were doing. It's very, very difficult. So from a parent point of view, from a kid point of view, there's a lot you can get out of this. Plus, it's funny. It's a great night at the theater. So Barra Grant, Miss America's Ugly Daughter at the Greenway Court Theater in Los Angeles and beyond. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And everybody,
Bye-bye.
thanks for being here for Deborah Kobylt Live. You can watch us on Facebook, also on YouTube. And if you want to listen, if you're in the car, hanging out, doing whatever, please listen to us on Apple Podcasts, also on the iHeartRadio app, and honestly, wherever else you get your podcasts, we're out there. Deborah Kobylt Live. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.